Good morning and welcome to Oh, to be a Raisin in the Milk, Tips for the Black Parent on Navigating the Private School Maze. My name is Tiffany Russell. We will review the agenda in a moment, but first my goal for these 30 minutes is simple, and that is to provide a foundation for future conversations around private schooling for African American students. A few notes before we get started. This webinar will be recorded and archived. Our moderator has muted the attendees but has allowed you all to ask questions in the box on the right. Should there be an opportunity to answer a few, I will at the very end of the webinar. Additionally, I want to say a few things about terminology. There are slight differences between private schools and independent schools. Both types of schools are lumped together under the prep school moniker, and I use the terms interchangeably. Likewise, while I use the terms African American and Black interchangeably, I'm acutely aware of the political and historical meanings behind each of these terms. With that out of the way, let's go ahead and get started, and welcome again. So here's our agenda. First we're going to introduce the purpose of today's webinar. Secondly, we're going to talk about the 20% diversity myth. Next, we'll talk about understanding the climate of the private school. Then tips for the application process, preparing your child for success, and with some closing comments. The purpose of this webinar is to help African American parents discuss the importance of researching and exploring the best option to educate their children. This webinar will focus on debunking the myths and exposing some realities about private school admission, and exploring strategies to help children succeed in private schools. If you could, for a moment, consider your earliest memories of being the other. So for 1 minute, sit quietly and think about the first time you knew you were, and insert your race or ethnicity there. Think about, was it a time, was it around a conflict or a series of conflicts? Was it a happy time? Did you feel empowered? Or did you feel othered? So for about 45 more seconds, consider that question. Thank you. I ask participants to indulge me in this short exercise to feel the context of the private school and also to set a foundation for our discussion today. I have been involved with private schools for over 20 years. I was a student at an elite private, predominantly white boarding school in the Northeast, and after attending college and receiving my master's degree in African American Studies, I returned to my alma mater to teach. I inserted this Hurston quote because she expresses what I felt as a student and a teacher, and I'll read it. In 1929, in an essay called How It Feels to Be Colored Me, Zora Neale Hurston wrote, "Beside the waters of the Hudson, I feel my race. Among 1,000 white persons, I am a dark rock surged upon and overswept. But through it all, I remain myself. When covered by the waters, I am, and the ebb but reveals me again." I've also served as a director of diversity at a large K-12 day school in Atlanta, as well as consulted with several private schools in the Atlanta area. Last, my doctoral dissertation explored the first-hand experiences of Black women who attended a prep school in the Northeast. Hurston's experiences at Barnard are very much like the experiences reported from people of color in predominantly white schools. Though Hurston experienced discrimination, she found ways to combat those feelings. So around the year 2000 is when you start to see a greater demand for diversity coordinators and directors. Most of the time, these offices are part-time, and often the person who held the office also had another appointment, perhaps an admission or counseling or even a classroom teacher. There are schools who hired full-time, fully administrative directors who would support the admission department and also school-wide programming. Now somehow, around 2000, this number of 20% diversity began to be circulated. You would hear questions like, wait, we have 20% diversity, isn't that enough? So I wanted to start here by exposing this myth because, first of all, this diversity myth is problematic for a number of reasons. First, this number is merely an arbitrary number that gives schools a reason to opt out to continue to diversify their campuses. Second, schools can define diversity in myriad ways by ethnicity, race, religion, social class, and a number of other factors. So a school may say and publicize that they have 20% diversity and actually only have one Black girl in the kindergarten class. Essentially, the diversity myth is exactly that. It's a myth. We want to see schools that never stop trying to enhance the learning experiences for all students, not only in terms of representation. The representation is important. Numbers are important. But we also want to see that schools are looking at their culture and their curriculum when claiming how diverse they truly are. In this regard, there are certain realities that parents must contend with, and the National Association of Independent Schools, or NAIS, has highlighted a few for us. Faculty of color make up about 13% of administrators of color. And that's a really important number here. And this is data coming from the 2010 and 2011 report. The NAIS puts out a report every year that takes a look at ethnicity and race in our private schools. So to read that again, almost 13% of teachers are teachers of color in independent schools. Administrators make up about 11%. Students of color now comprise 25.9%, almost 26%, but African American students are 6% of that number. So when looking at these numbers, it is highly possible that African American children could go to a school where they see very few African Americans in leadership positions and in the classroom. So let's take a moment now, because we've discussed the realities of many private schools. I want to take some time to discuss some strategies when applying to these schools. These strategies can be applied across regions. So whether you live in the Northeast or on the West Coast, here are a few things parents should do as they are choosing a school for their child and for their families. The first thing that I have here is to make a list of all the qualities you are looking for in a school. Parents should make a list of the kind of educational experiences they want for their children. Consider the whole school environment, knowing that children are in school for the majority of the day and, of course, the full week. So you want to consider the academics, athletics, and, of course, extracurricular activities. So, for example, do you want a small learning environment, a small school, or a large college-like campus? Another example, would you prefer an environment where children are encouraged to create their own learning environments? Or would you prefer a structured, tailored learning environment for your child? Second, research organizations like A Better Chance, Prep for Prep, and other organizations or foundations whose mission it is to prepare children of color for the rigors of private school. I was fortunate to attend my private school on a full 4-year scholarship. This scholarship, however, did not come with any sort of support from my family or from myself. And that support would come in terms of mentoring and things of that nature, forums, and pairing me with another African American student who also went through the same program. However, I went to school with friends who came from programs with this type of support, as well as financial support. These organizations also do a great job to help parents with the admission process. Additionally, parents should look for organizations that host local forums and admission fairs specifically for parents of color. It's at these forums where parents can ask candid questions and receive answers, and also speak with current faculty and perhaps even admission folks from those private schools. Third, make a calendar of all the open houses you and your children want to attend. Open houses and campus tours are great ways to get a feeling of the school. However, many schools offer opportunities for applicants to shadow another student, and I would strongly advise encouraging your child to spend a day at their top 3 schools. This is a great opportunity to see a day in the life academically, and for your child to ask candid questions of other students and to experience the culture firsthand. Oftentimes it's difficult to get a true feeling of the culture when the campus is all dressed up for an open house. Everyone is looking their best and acting their best. So it's really important to see the school, as it's functioning in a normal capacity. And then you also want to learn about the school's expansion years and exactly how many openings there are per grade. So an expansion year is when they are able to expand kindergarten. For example, for a school that begins at kindergarten is an expansion year. So if parents are looking to get their children admitted to kindergarten, you would want to find out first how many openings there are. And please don't be afraid to ask about legacy spots. In other words, how many spaces are allocated for siblings of current students? You may not get a straightforward answer, but questions like this tells the school that you're savvy and that you understand, I guess, the politics within the admission process.